everyone! My name is Courtney Kuhn, and I am here to show you something really cool. And excuse my glasses, it was a very casual day today. It's quite funny that I mentioned that because what I'm about to show you today is something that I make when I'm just hanging out or it's just a casual, relaxing day. And what is it, you may ask? I am going to teach you how to make bows. And not just any bows, but bows that you can use whether it's a hair bow or a bow tie or a baby bow tie. And I'm not going to show you how to purpose them in this video. I'm just going to be showing you how to make the bows. And I am going to be showing you the two ways to do it. One is by machine, and one of them is by hand sewing it. And there's two things you can make it from, which is just normal fabric, like this, or a tie. So I'm really excited because bows are something that I make all the time. I know I'm not a 6-year-old girl, but I wear hair bows a lot. I love them, and I love making bow ties for my husband and for my nephews. So I'm really excited to show you this because I get a lot of people asking how I make my bows. So let's get into it.
So what you're going to need is you're going to need material for what you're making your bow out of, thread, needle, and scissors. You're going to want to pick thread that matches your fabric so that it will be invisible on the back. I chose thread that will stand out while I'm doing this tutorial. I make my little bows out of scrap fabric, but if you want to know the dimensions I used, it's about 7 inches by about 3.5. If you want a bigger bow, then you just increase the size of your fabric. If you're making it out of a tie, then what you want to do is you want to clip off the very tip because it's unnecessary and it just creates bulk. Then what I tend to do is I fold it over and I scrunch it up and I play with it just to try to get a feel for what size I want out of the bow, and then I add about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you would like to know the measurements of the piece I cut out, it's about 13 inches. I know there's a lot of people that thread their needles differently, but how I do it is when I thread my needle, I pull the string all the way through until each end match up, as shown right here. And then I knot the 2 strands together, creating 2 strands of thread on my needle. Pull your knot very tight and then go in for a double knot because sometimes the knot just goes right through your fabric. I like sewing with 2 strands as shown here with a knot at the top because it just makes your stitch much stronger with 2 strands versus just 1. With needle in hand, pull out your fabric and fold it lengthwise with right sides together. You're going to start at the end and just stitch across. What you're going to do is give yourself about a 1/2 inch seam allowance and just do a running stitch all the way across your fabric. Instead of just going the back and forth, I'll actually do what you just saw right here, and I will just stitch right through the fabric and I'll make multiple stitches in a row on my needle just like this. And then pull through when my needle is full of fabric. You won't need to make the spaces in between your stitches very big or very small because essentially this is just to keep it in place while you're stitching the other areas. Now that you're at the end, you're going to tie off. So flip your fabric over and use the stitch. Pull your needle through the stitch and then pull it through the loop that you just made. You're going to do this twice to double knot it and make sure that it is secure. Pull it really tight, and when you're done, just clip off the rest. When you're doing this on a machine, it's very fast and very quick. Again, fold it lengthwise, right sides together, put it in your machine, do a front stitch, a quick back stitch, and then front stitch all the way down until the very end. Then do a little back stitch and release. That was super quick and easy. Now what you're going to do is you're going to flip your bow right side out. You can use a tool for this, or you can use any type of long stick, but I like doing it by hand because, like I said, this is something that I'll do while I'm sitting on the couch watching TV or just hanging out. Now that it's right side out, you're going to make sure it's secure and then fold your tube in half with the stitch on the back. You're going to fold your tube in half with the stitch facing outward. Make sure it's nice and taut and there's no wrinkles. You're going to stitch across the raw edges, giving yourself a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you're going to stitch it the same way you did when you stitched the first time. Now instead of tying off this time, put your needle down and turn your tube inside out. Now with the machine, the same way you did the first time, front stitch, front stitch, and back stitch. It's super quick, super easy, and turn it inside out. Now with a tie, you skip the first sewing step because it's already done and go right to the second sewing step of sewing together the raw edges, just like this. Now what you're going to do is you are going to stitch straight down the middle of the front half of your bow and just do a quick little stitch back and forth, and pull tight. Now with all your stitches, you are going to pull them very tight. But first you need to open up your seam allowance so it doesn't create any extra bulk. Pull tight, scrunch it, make it look like a little bow. And then what I do is I wind it around the center a few times, 3 or 4 times, just so it stays in place even without its tie. Now that you've wound it up as many times as you desired, you're going to tie off. Get your needle under a stitch and then through the loop you just made and tighten. Do it once more for security. Now with the machine bows, you're going to have to stitch the back and the front since you didn't do it by hand. Make sure that your seam allowance is flat so you get rid of the bulk and stitch through both sides. Then you're going to tighten just like you did with the other one and wind it up. With the tie bow, you're going to do the same thing as the machine bow. Stitch the back and the front and wind it only about 2 or 3 times, just like this. Now for the center of your bow. Cut a little piece of fabric about 1.5 inches by about 2.5 inches. If your bow is bigger, then cut it bigger. Then you're going to do just like you did with the bow, right sides together, and stitch across, but this time only do about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to tie it off when you finish, just like you did before. Now that you're finished, you're going to be turning it right side out. This is where a turning tool could be useful, but I just use my scissors because they're small and they're easy to use, and even if they poke through your fabric, it's not going to cut your fabric. Now straighten out your middle tie. Just do this by working with it, making sure all the seams are hidden and all the seam allowances are inside. Then make sure the seam is in the middle on the back and play with it and make sure it's the length you want it and where you want to put it. I also fold over an edge to make a very clean edge on the back. Now for the machine, it's the same exact way that you did it before with your bow. You do a little front stitch with a little back stitch, then you front stitch all the way down and a little back stitch at the very end. For the middle part of the tie bow, you're going to use the skinny end. I already used this for another tie, so that's why it's cut off, but you're going to be measuring and marking where you want it. If you'd like to know how long this is, it's about 5 inches. It's a little too thick for my bow, so I take out the insert and I just throw it away. Then what you're going to do is open it up and fold it in half. And you're going to be stitching it down the line. However, you need to make sure that your right sides are together so that you're stitching the correct way. Now you're going to cut off your excess because you don't need that much in the middle. Now with your needle and thread, you're going to stitch. I start inside the middle of the tie at the back, that way the knot is hidden. Then I just stitch on one side of the tie to the other side of the tie, as you can see here. And I just stitch the two sides together. And this last step of adding the middle tie to the bow is for all bow ties, whether they be by hand, on the machine, or fabric, or out of a tie. Now that I'm at the end, I'm going to be tying off. So I get underneath a stitch and put my needle through the loop that I just made and knot. And do it again for security. Now I'm going to play around with it and just make sure the wrinkles are where I want them, everything's hidden, and maybe even adjust the center part if needed.
Thank you so much for watching. I love how they turned out. I think they're the cutest little thing on the planet, and this one turned out pretty good too. Might become one of my hair bows. But again, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Hit that bell so you can be notified when I post new videos. And if you follow me on social media, which actually happens to be right here behind me. If you follow me on social media, you will know when I post videos and what I'm doing, because I'm always posting when I make new things. So thank you so much, guys. Bye!